All right, here we go. Thank you, everybody, for choosing to share your time with me. I know that this is the beginning of a new festival and multiple rooms and multiple options. So I really appreciate those who have decided to come and share some time with me. And so this Cosmic Lovers Festival is touching to me because I feel that I have some cosmic lovers in Israel. And Avishag, Michal, Amber, Nimrod, Budi, these are all brothers and sisters that I consider lovers in my life. And so I'm really touched to be invited. And yeah, so what I have to share with you today is it's a lot of, because I'm not in there with you, it's difficult to do like interactive. So I wanted to give you more of a philosophical perspective of what we're doing. Like, what does it mean that we're coming together and we're doing like Cosmic Lovers Festival, and we're exploring sexuality and love, and we're finding new reference points for relating. And so I wanted to give us a big picture of what we're actually doing. And the idea is this: seeding the sexual renaissance. And I say seeding because the sexual renaissance is just a vibration that I feel that is flowing through me and wanting to express itself. And I see this sexual renaissance as a follow-up to the sexual revolution. And it's a seeding because it's a conversation we're having. Like, we're all part of this. This is not my information. This is information that's coming through me that I'm channeling from this collective that we are all bringing. So I'm trying to give a metaphor for what we're doing as a collective so that we can have a similar vision and a similar co-creation. So if we're seeing things in a similar way, we could all be investing our energy towards bringing it through. So I'm going to start by just saying a couple words about me. I don't want to talk too much about myself. Most of you could find more information about me on the internet. But basically, very young, I decided to live an unconventional life. I got married at 23 years old and I was divorced by 30. And somewhere in between, even before I got married, I was very clear that I wasn't going to do things the same way. I wasn't going to say that because I got married, that means that I would be monogamous. Same thing with my work. I didn't want to work for a company 9 to 5. I was doing it. I got to the top and I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to follow the vibration of my heart and what wants to emerge. And what emerged was an event that I created called Mondeose, which means daring people, daring world in French. And basically, these were sensual dance parties that brought together a rave-type atmosphere with a erotic performance art, a bit like Cirque du Soleil meets a dance party. And so I've been doing that for the last 13 years. And somewhere in the middle, I had a personal professional breakdown. And I decided to like really question everything in my life, including all the energy I put into Mondeose. And I said, I'm willing to change up everything. And during that time, I had an awakening. And basically, I found love. And then I decided to dedicate the energetic of love that was flowing through me towards learning about sacred sexuality and supporting sacred sexuality. And since then, I've become faculty on the International School of Temple Arts. And I've been teaching in about 10 countries over the last 3 years. By September, I will have done 20 spiritual, sexual, shamanic experiences, which I co-facilitated. So, show of hands, how many of you have done ISTA? None of you. Okay, great. One. Okay, cool. Thank you. Just to get an idea of my pace with this talk. So, the beginning of this talk, I want to look at it from the perspective of asking ourselves two questions. First question is, where do we learn about sex as a culture, as the last 50 years? And where do we learn about love as a culture over the last 50 years? And I put this as a rhetorical question. It's like we find ourselves in a precipice of awakening, and we're all coming from our stories, our families, our culture, our communities. And so I want to know, it's like we're talking about sexuality, and we have to really be conscious of where we have come from with all the notions and where we're meeting life with the notions from our past. So it's really bold to start to take a questioning perspective of our life and our culture, of our sexuality, and asking ourselves about sex and love, because it puts into question everything we've been told to believe. So before I go into the sexual renaissance, I think it's important that we do a little summary of what was the sexual revolution. And so the sexual revolution happened between the 60s and the 80s. And it was a time of sexual liberation where the population challenged the sex norms, because intercourse outside of a monogamous heterosexual marriage was deemed immoral and unethical. So to change this idea, a revolution was needed. It was a fight. So what's a revolution? A revolution is it's a complete destruction. It's a complete turning around of the current status quo. And so the two major points was the women's movement, where it was the rejection of the typical gender roles. And secondly was the fact that women could experience sexuality as recreation, because it was the advent of the birth control pill. So this completely changes everything when we're talking about how we interact with our culture, with our partners, with ourselves, what this means, the freedom that the women had by doing this. So it was a real battle. And just to give you some dates, like 1960 was the introduction of the pill. Within 5 years, 6 million users. Think about that. 1965, contraception became legal for married couples only. So about 50 years ago, we weren't allowed to have sex with contraception in a married couple. Wow. 1972, contraception became legal for unmarried couples. And in 1973, there was the legalization of abortion. So this absolutely changed everything again. So now if we fell pregnant, that we could actually have a procedure that allows us not to have to bring in life. It was complete new version of freedom and liberation. And so the second thing that happened in the sexual revolution was the gay liberation movement. And it was only until 1973 where they actually removed homosexuality from the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Until that time, homosexuality was seen as a mental disorder. So that was the oppression that was held on us. That was the control of our consciousness, that we could not make love for recreation because we didn't have ways to protect ourselves from not having children. We were interested in our same sex, that this was actually considered a mental disorder. This is heavy repression. So what is a Renaissance? So before we speak about the Renaissance, we have to talk about what was the Renaissance. There was one major Renaissance, and it was between the 1300s and the 1600s. And this was coming out of the Dark Ages, the Medieval Ages, the Middle Ages, where it was a really heinous time. It lasted about 1,000 years, and it crossed over 500, I think. Hold on, if I think correctly, it was 500 to 1,500. And so the Renaissance began in 1300 and ended in the 1600, so the Renaissance was responsible for moving us out of the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. So what was the Renaissance? The Renaissance was a rebirth, not a fight, a rebirth. And basically it was a great revival of art. So we know that with Michelangelo, Da Vinci, literature, science, music, religion, self-awareness, and learning. So the Renaissance comes and gives us this reconnection to aliveness, to beauty, to aestheticism. And it fed the consciousness. It fed the consciousness of the people. It fed ideas. And so we enter into what I'm calling a sexual renaissance. And I'm claiming it is happening as of the 21st century. We could even give it to the date of the Mayan calendar, December 21st, 2012. Of course, that's like an acupuncture point, but there's vibration before and vibration after, and the vibration after is just starting. It's like we're entering into this age of Aquarius, leaving the age of Pisces, enter into the age of Aquarius, and we're just starting. So we are actually the pioneers of this sexual renaissance. We are pioneers of claiming the right to have a new idea around sexuality, that we are allowed to look at sexuality from a place of beauty. And why it's a renaissance? Because it's a return, it's a going back. And what we're going back to is sacred sexuality, what has always been around. And so the sexual renaissance is the art of studying sacred sexuality and its power and potential of a spiritual practice. And so we are raising sexuality to the element of spiritual practice. And so what that means is that we are, as we get together in community, we are starting to learn, understand, and accept our full nature, our animal nature, which is our current manifest reality, and our spirit nature, which is what our religions and which our spiritual lineages would have us connect to, which has always been like heart chakra up. And so what has happened with that is that it has made everything that was below the heart chakra dirty and bad. So think of it. I mean, our genitals are bad. Our sisters' moons are bad when they bleed. Sexuality, poop, excretion, these are all like very taboo, but we must accept this, and we must understand its role in our lives, in our current expression as beings in this world. So as long as we're rejecting something, we cannot come to our wholeness and be into the spiritual practice, spiritual lineage, and religious enlightenment if there's a part of us that we're still rejecting. So for me, my question is like, what's the potential of sacred sexuality and a sexual renaissance in a brave new world? I'm making reference to Aldous Huxley book from 1932, which spoke of a dystopian future with technology, we were being bred. And so this is kind of like what's happening. There's mass unemployment. We're having conversations of singularity, man connecting with machine, virtual reality. It's like we're going away from our nature, from our animal body. So there's a sexual renaissance in addition to reclaiming the spiritual practices of the ancients that we are also, so we're calling that in, and we don't really know too much about it because it's been burned down with the burning of the libraries and the killings of the shaman. So the only opportunity we have is to feel into ourselves and connect to our history and our DNA and our lineage. So what happens if as a people we start to claim our bodies as temples? So regular sex. So what's going on in the culture today? Regular sex. What's regular sex? We have sex like pre-sexual revolution was very focused on procreation. You're having sex with procreation. Post-sexual revolution, you had this idea of now we could actually go into recreation because we have ways to protect ourselves. And so we have really entered in our culture the space of recreational sex. That is what has become very popular. It's when we speak of promiscuity, we don't even talk about promiscuity anymore. It's almost changing because there's promiscuity almost had a negative connotation, and now it's, I don't know, maybe going towards polyamory if we could bring in some consciousness. But that's a whole other conversation. I'm not going to get derailed. I have so much to share with you. So recreational sex. So what is sacred sex, and what is the potential of sacred sex in the sexual renaissance? This is the type of sex we're going to start to have more and more of in the sexual renaissance. And it's the lesser acknowledged restorative sex. Restorative sex and transformational sex. So restorative sex, so what do these two have in common? Is that the key ingredient for restorative sex and transformational sex is intention. And what makes something sacred is coming to take a moment towards creating a space of conscious intention and speaking out that conscious intention so that it's heard and it's in the ethers. So restorative sex is basically the type of sex that we intentionally have in order to bring a revitalization to our body, to bring health to our body. We're actually using sexuality as a way to feed the body and source the body's life force energy and move it throughout our body in order to have more aliveness and more vitality. And this could happen like as a practice because we have disease, or we could do this as an intentional. It's like, okay, I want to make love and I want to feel aliveness. I don't want to have that dip of tiredness after I ejaculate. So maybe I want to feel alive and I want to use this energy and I want to channel this energy. So I won't ejaculate. I'll choose not to ejaculate. So part of intention in restorative sex is ejaculatory choice, for men at least. And the second one is transformational sex. And transformational sex is the type of sex that changes you. It's like you're not the same person after you've had that type of sex or that type of experience. And that sometimes is marked by moving of a certain trauma, of certain blocks, maybe challenging your limited beliefs around what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and daring and then discovering something great. And therefore, it changes your reality and your relationship with sexuality. Or maybe during your lovemaking, you get this download. And this download is the most important information that you've had that really allows you to see something you are missing. You get a big aha. That is the potential of transformational sex. I often joke that a lot of my events with Mondeose were created after having transformational sex, because I would make the intention to get a vision of what I would like to create in the upcoming event. And I would get a seed. And then I would finish making love, and then I would take the opportunity to talk about what I saw in that seed. And from the seed of an idea that came into my mind or my consciousness during transformational sex, I create events and storylines. So this is the potential. So sacred sex is intentional and it's heart-centered. One thing that we see that has been happening in our culture in regards to sexuality is the separation of love or heart and sexuality. So certain situations we're allowed to have our heart into it, but sexuality, it's like if there's heart, we shouldn't be animals. And on the other side, it's like, oh, I'm giving my permission to have recreational sex, and so this is just fun and there's no attachment. So I remove the heart from the sexuality. But sacred sex doesn't separate. Sacred sex unites. So that no matter whether you're having sex for procreation, recreation, revitalization, or restorative and transformational, heart is always present. Imagine if we connected. It's not imagine. The idea of lovemaking and sexuality and sacred sex is the fact that our bodies meet and all our body meets. All the parts. Our heart included, our heart most importantly, and of course our genitals. But becoming the bridge. So if sacred sex is our opportunity to connect with higher realms while we're on this terrestrial realm, it's only normal that our sexuality is holy. And our sexuality is exactly what connects us to our divine states. But it has to be heart-centered. And the last point I put there is like the doorway to non-ordinary reality. And what does that mean is that non-ordinary reality is like everyday reality is what we see. It's the way we connect. It's the mind driving the information. Non-ordinary reality is when we get out of mind and we have an experience. We are witnessing life through the subtle realms. We're witnessing life through non-ordinary reality because we are charged with tremendous amounts of life force energy, and we're taking the time to be present in that energy. And so when we open and we link our heart to that, we are actually connected to the highest realms. And all we have to do is intend on it and have a conversation about it, or just be present. So going current, I want to speak more about our current sex and love script. So before we're going to talk about the sexual renaissance and what we could do with it, I want us to really be conscious of what ordinary reality is. So we see sex and love as a commodity. It's consumerism. It's used for transaction and exploitation. And why do I say that? Because if we're honest with each other, oftentimes we're trading. We're trading sexuality for power, or we're trading power for love, or we're trading love for sex. And that's what our culture has taught us. It's given us a very, very materialistic perspective of what love and sex is. It's given us a program where you either don't have sex because it's wrong and immoral and dirty and sinful. I mean, there's one religion that the child has to be cleansed in order for him to enter into the kingdom of God because their parents had a sinful act. So it's cleansing the original sin. So it's like, that is an energy that has been coming on to us like crazy. We can't deny it. And on the other side, currently we have this energy of materialistic sex and love. And we see that through our Valentine's Day campaigns. We see that through the way we sell product using sexuality. So desire is the easiest way to go get the attention of the human spirit. I know this as a marketer. I know this as a spiritual being. So if you're playing with desire, you get the attention. So corporations have agreed, using sexuality to get attention. That is completely okay. So sexuality is in front of us constantly, consistently, with certain roles and scripts that are coming through us. But the expression of it, sometimes questionable. And if we do have it, we are being indoctrinated, or at least a large percentage of males and young males are being indoctrinated of a script of sexuality through pornography. So it's scary, this brave new world. So the shadow of the current sex script is power. And we saw that with the coming out of the hashtag #MeToo. So the masculine version of this power shadow is control, domination. I'm assuming that everybody knows what shadow is. Shadow is the parts of ourselves that we disown. So we could disown it for ourselves as we could disown it for the collective. The shadow sex script of the feminine and the use of power is the manipulation of power. So I don't want to go too much into it. I just want to give the information. And if you're getting triggered or you're feeling some unsavory feelings, that's okay. Your emotions are welcome. And the idea is, this current sex script and love script is not fun. The current love script is, the shadow of it is codependence. And it's this idea that once you've met the person of your life, that this is the one. This is the one and only. And anytime that the attention veers elsewhere because there is a distraction or an impulse, a temptation, a desire, that this is met with jealousy and possessiveness. And so it's like I'm only actualized by the reflection of my partner. So if my partner is looking elsewhere, looking outside for something that I don't bring to the table, that somehow that takes something away from me. And so what ends up happening is we get into the story of jealousy, possessiveness, anger, and so we want to be moving away from this idea of the relationship elevator. So the relationship elevator is we meet, we connected, it was delicious. I'm already 3 steps ahead. Oh my God, next date. Oh my God, maybe Christmas. I'm going to invite them to my family. Sorry, not Christmas, or any holiday or gathering. We're going to invite them with my family. I'm going to introduce them to my family. And then from there, we're going to get married and married to kids and kids to the house and house to the vacation home. So we're already fast forward. And, we barely had our 3rd date. And so when we think like this, or we allow our mind to get excited and be in the future versus the present moment, we lose presence. We lose presence with ourselves, we lose presence with what's important, and we start to give our power away to others. And so, the idea of codependence is also this, the projection of the potential. It's like, yes, we need to be together because if we're together, there's all this potential. And so we're holding and grasping and getting attached to potential. And what we're getting out of the relationship, when we're talking about the shadow of the current sex script around love, is that actually the love that we're exchanging, when it's not conscious, intentional, and communicative, honest, what's happening, it's like, I want you in my life because if you're loving me, then I am worthy. And so if you're not loving me, if I can't get your love, then I'm not worthy. And that will put me into some level of sadness or depression. So we're living a bit of a dyslexic society. And from one side, as I was mentioning, it's like we're indoctrinated from shame, fear, and guilt due to religious trauma. There's at least one religion out there that's very popular that has colonialized a large part of the planet, that used 500 years of torture and murder and genocide to move forward an agenda. And so there's been a cellular indoctrination of shame, fear, and guilt when it comes to sexuality, because people were being killed due to heresy, sodomy, adultery, and you didn't have to be proven. You just had to be accused, and then you would be killed in the most heinous of ways. So we have to remember that 500 years on this done onto a major population actually enters into our existence and our consciousness and our cellular memory, and we're moving around with this, and this is what we're holding when it comes to sexuality. And so I think everybody has work to do around their relationship with sexuality, coming from the religious trauma that we have. And then on the other side is this fact that we have pornography and sex cues, social sex cues all over, whether it be through social media, whether it be through marketing and advertising, as I alluded to before, whether it be to pornography. We're having all these cues, sporting events with the cheerleaders, whatever. It's always the cues of sexuality. Up your desire, up your need to want to connect. But then we're not going to give you a proper space to do that. And then we're going to shame you to do it. And then we're going to leave you disempowered. So the sexual renaissance is about regaining our power and reclaiming our sexuality. And the journey of spirituality ultimately is self-love, our inner marriage of our masculine and feminine, and coming to wholeness, realizing we are it. That there's, yes, we can have an experience outside of ourselves, but our being is the full experience. So advertising, just to give you a couple of ideas of how we get social cues. Notice the Dolce & Gabbana ad where it's actually, you know, promoting rape culture. Our idols. You know, for me, it's like when I see pictures like this, I'm like, man, I wish I had the opportunity to spend a weekend with these women. And what could happen if we brought the energy of sacred sexuality to people that have the consciousness, that have the attention of the consciousness of our culture? If these women understood the power of their sexuality, and men, there's men as well that are doing things like this, that they could use their power to really bring through information that could empower a culture, a new culture. So the pillars of the sexual renaissance. The first, I'm going to make a list here. So this is what's coming up for us in the next half hour. Is number one, the inner marriage of masculine and feminine. 2, life force mastery. 3, emotional currency. Authentic communication. Love as freedom. Expanding the capacity for bliss. So these are what I'm calling my 6 pillars of the sexual renaissance. Now, this is just, like I said, a conversation. You guys are all invited to support this movement. And so this is a starting point. So we have the rise of the sacred feminine. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm just going to display it online on the screen. So the idea of the rise of the sacred feminine, we've been hearing about that quite a lot. And so, you know, for me, it's important that we understand what the sacred feminine looks like and what also exists in the current culture. And when I say feminine or masculine, I mean that each one of us have feminine traits and masculine traits. And these traits, they're discussion purposes. This is not in stone. You could also say active and receptive. You could also say yin and yang. Use the words that you'd like, but at Ista, we use masculine and feminine. So like we have these traits of the wounded feminine. So the wounded feminine comes from fear. She's dramatic. She manipulates. I said that already. Contracts. It's self-sacrificing. I've been self-sacrificing so much. I see myself in the wounded feminine so much. And plays the victim or is the victim. Doesn't connect to the fact that she's the conscious creator. The sacred feminine is grounded. She has healthy boundaries. I'm going to talk a bit about that later. She's compassionate. She's magnetic. She calls in after she vibrates with beautiful energy and radiates her love. She magnetizes. And she's wise. She comes from the place of the wisdom. She doesn't always have to be scientific rationalism. It's like she knows because she uses her intuition and she connects to the lineages before. And so I want to read this line because it's probably the most important line of what's coming for the sexual renaissance. So the feminine understands that she has been abused and subjugated and knows that planetary healing will only begin when she begins to love and nurture once again. So there's a lot of wounding around the feminine. And so we have to claim that we are wounded in the feminine. We have to see where we are in one side of the spectrum. And we have to consciously decide to move towards the other side of the spectrum. And that's spirituality for me. Spirituality is like bringing consciousness to each step and being aware. The new awakened masculine. The new awakened masculine is the term that I'm using for the masculine that's emerging. And so the unhealthy masculine provokes, selects, distorts, reacts, very reactive, aggressive, withdraws when he's not feeling loved, controlling, could be a bully or a tyrant. And again, this could be a man or a woman. And usually I like to go into all of it and really expand and give you examples. But with the time, I'm just deciding to go through, and some of you have already been through this. So this is the idea. So the awakened masculine holds space, creates safety, witnesses without judgment. The masculine is the presence. It's the temple. It's the walls. It's the structure. That anything could happen within the structure, and that there's going to be safety. And that we could transmute all of this. And so the feminine is the energy within the container. It is the expression of life. And the masculine is the container of life. So key note here is the masculine acknowledges the damage inflicted by his controlling nature. So he's taking responsibility because he takes accountability. And understands that planetary healing will only begin when he focuses his attention from moving from power over to power sharing. So I just want to pause here. I just want to connect with you guys. Maybe I don't know, give me a couple words. Is this landing, or am I off in left field? Is it good? Is it not good? Anything you need from me to give it a better delivery? Everything's good? Great, thank you. I'm going to keep on driving content. I'm sending love. Stay comfortable. All is good. I just want to check in with the audience to make sure. It's very difficult sometimes with this transmission of being through a camera and not really being there to feel you, to see you, and to get your responses. So when I do these talks over camera, I just like to deliver transmission, and what you get, and not, and hopefully the pieces that you get, you repeat, and we start building this sexual renaissance. So the second pillar of the sexual renaissance is this idea of coming into life force mastery. So once we understand that we are the masculine and feminine, once we understand that we're moving towards these disempowered ways of behaving, towards these empowered ways of behaving, and that we're bringing awareness and consciousness to it, trying to be our best self every moment, then there's the marriage of the masculine and feminine. So we are one. And then we are starting to work with our energy. The energy in our body is the one and only thing that animates us. It is life. So we must get into relationship with this life force energy. And there's methods that have been used, that have been accepted. Meditation, yoga, exercise, fitness, nutrition. These all affect life force mastery. But the engine is our sexuality. This is what really takes all these ingredients and applies them to spiritual connection. Imagine if we started to look at sexuality that way. That sexuality, when harnessing all the ingredients, can actually be the vehicle that connects us with source, with our highest self, with the oneness. So in order to do that, we need to understand how to have a relationship with this life force in our body and how to circulate the energy from our sex center up and out towards the rest of the body. So the 4 keys of Tantra, which is life force mastery, the study of life force mastery, are presence, so just coming into presence and not doing, just being. And then sound, breath, and movement. And culturally, we don't breathe very well. A lot of times we breathe in the upper third. So sacred sex really takes the practice of taking deep belly breath. Sounding, that we actually exhale with a sound. Movement, that we're actually connected to the other through our presence, through our stillness. We connect to the other and we find what movements want to happen to serve each other in lovemaking. And you could use this in lovemaking as you could use with yourself. Dance is about presence in the body, not being in the mind, completely being in the body, and using sound, breath, and movement to allow the music to take you. And so sound, breath, and movement, and being a tantrika, because those are the 4 keys of Tantra. And so once you're doing this, you've already started the process of being a tantrika. It's very intuitive. We're all tantrics by nature. Birth is a tantric. The first breath coming through the birth canal is we take a breath, we start to cry, and we start to move. We are tantric at birth. So what we're in sacred sexuality, what we're doing is basically bringing consciousness to what is always already happening. We're bringing consciousness to what is always already happening. And that's very difficult to do in every moment. So we're in and out. The 3rd pillar of the sexual renaissance, emotional currency. And why do I say currency? Currency is happening because what's emotion? Emotion is energy in motion. So that's like a current. It's like electricity. Emotion is like electricity. It moves. It's moving. Emotion is not what you are. It's what you're experiencing. Then, if it's not what you are, it's what you're experiencing. What you want to try to do is be emotionally current. Current means being in our centeredness, being in our stillness, being aware of what's going on in our emotions. When our emotions are peaking, that we are current with the fact that it's peaking and that we want to come back into center. So that's emotional, being emotionally current. And then there's emotional currency. Yes. Currency, it has money. It's like it's got value. What does that mean? Emotion as value. Well, because behind emotion is untapped power and untapped potential. And so, if we are able to move past emotional blocks or emotional peaks and channel that energy and no longer allow it to leak, we have access to this power. And what can we do with this power if we direct it somewhere? For example, I'm directing it right now into this conversation, into this idea, seeding of the sexual renaissance, into bringing it into the world. So my responsibility is to stay emotionally current so that I'm not leaking energy towards superficial and worthless things, and I'm bringing it towards what really matters. So how do we get out of being emotionally current? It's while we try to control the outside world. We're scared of our feelings. We're scared of feeling intense feelings, or we think it's wrong, or we think we need to hide it. And so therefore we say, oh, I don't want to feel all these bad things, or I'm scared. So in order to protect myself from living these fearful experiences, I'm going to control the outside world. So I'm going to invest all my energy, all my emotional energy, and I'm going to invest it into controlling the outside world. And let me tell you, that gets freaking tiring. It gets really, really tiring when we're constantly putting our energy towards controlling the outside world. It's much easier to drop into presence and feel. And so what do we do when we feel? Our responsibility is to fully experience these emotions and to move these emotions, not to stuff them. The time of stuffing the emotion is over. We have to give ourselves permission to express our emotions. And there's positive ways of expressing our emotions and negative ways of expressing our emotions. Negative is when we lash out, when we direct these dense emotional energies towards others, versus taking responsibility, moving it so that we could come into our centeredness, so we could have clear and empowering conversations. So let me talk about the different types of emotions. There's dense emotions and light emotions. I don't want to call them good or bad, because all emotions are allowed. And so I'm here as part of the Sexual Renaissance to give you permission to feel all your emotions. So we have the dense emotions, which are anger, rage, sadness, despair. And we have light emotions, which are joy, bliss, excitement, love, tenderness, and so on and so forth. And so in our culture, light emotions are celebrated, but not too much, because you might make some people unhappy. If you're too happy, you'll trigger the fact that they're not happy. But usually happy emotions are okay, but not too much. Don't be too ecstatic. It might mean you're having too much good sex, and that's triggering for some people. And then on the other side, we have anger, rage, sadness, and despair. And this is very judged emotions. These are the emotions which people don't want to let you know that they're experiencing. These are the emotions that are feeding those ideas of suicide. Our brightest stars who drop into take their life are doing so because they may not have this space to acknowledge these more dense emotions. So at ISTA, we have at least a day and a half of dealing with our emotions and what tools that we have around moving our emotional energy. And so one of my teachers, Crystal Dawn Morris, came up with this great idea. I love it. She's a lead with the International School of Temple Arts. And so, you know, there's the GPS. The GPS helps you get from one place to another on the map in the city. Well, she's come up with the EGS, the emotional guidance system. It works very similarly. So, you know, when we're driving on the road and we're getting tired and we're getting to the destination of our GPS, and we're getting tired, and there's those rumble strips on the side of the road, and we either are not paying attention because we're talking or we're drifting off, and those rumble strips are there to wake you up. Da, 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 da. You know, you have this experience like, oh shoot, I lost awareness, I lost consciousness for a moment, and I was drifting off the road. And so I'm bringing myself back to centeredness. So the EGS is those emotions. So anger, rage, sadness, despair, so on and so forth. These are the rumble strips. These are the things telling you that something is not working for you. Something in your body system is not okay with the situation. You must come back to center. What is going on that's keeping you out of center? What you cannot control, you cannot change. So the responsibility is to feel, move, and transmute these dense energies. Feel, move, and transmute these dense energies, emotions. And so we have tools for emotional release. And some of the tools for emotional release, I'm going to go through some of them just so that I give you, 3, is very simple. Number 1, take your hands together, put them on your mouth, and scream like a wild man as you shake your hips. This is energy in motion. I'm so mad. I'm already feeling better. Or power stomping. Kids have this. Think about when some of you might have kids when they're in the grocery store and they're not getting what they want. I'm mad. They do power stomping. Pillow screaming. Ah! Ah! For real, try it. It works. The things you can change that are affecting your emotional state, you must transmute this energy. And it's our responsibility. That's part of the responsibility of, being awakened. And so, as I said before, behind emotion is untapped power and potential. So when you come back to your centeredness, imagine how much more effective you become when you're coming from this place of centeredness versus reaction. And I'm speaking to myself as well, because this is the biggest place of my personal work. And I know there's a lot of us there. And so number 4, authentic communication. I'm just going to put this all out in one shot because I'm going to speak rather quickly on this. So the idea, here's the deal, guys. In order to be empowered creators in the world, we have to be willing to speak our truth. If we're not speaking our truth because we want to protect the feelings of the other, if we're not speaking our truth because we want to manipulate the situation so that we can get more out of it because we're scared that if we say our truth, we're going to lose something, you're cheating. We're cheating. We're cheating. For me, the 4th pillar, the pillar of authentic communication is vital for the sexual renaissance. Because if we're not speaking our truth, there's no way we could truly authentically meet each other. And sometimes speaking our truth means saying things that are uncomfortable, which will incite the reaction, but it will give you the opportunity to deal with it honestly, and stop leaking energy towards, for example, guilt or fear. So it puts it on the table. And why I love this is because for me, the most important thing I want in relationship, whether it be monogamy, polyamory, whatever it is choice. Is choice. And why choice? As long as you have choice, you have power. The minute somebody takes away your choice, or you take away somebody else's choice, you've actually gone, it goes into manipulation. And so Nobody wants manipulation. Manipulation is a form of abuse or control. And so we want to always give people choice, or at least I always want choice, even if it comes with some bad news. That's where I come from. So here are some ways to have authentic communication. These are some ways to have a difficult conversation. Margot Anand, the matriarch of Western Neo-Tantra, came up with this amazing exercise called creating the bubble and doing the exercise of the desire spheres and boundaries. And the bubble is this idea that we create a space around us, energetically saying that we're gonna have a conversation here. And I'm gonna speak to you certain of my desires, which I'm scared to own, and I'm gonna speak certain of my fears that I'm scared to voice and have people hear, and I'm gonna share my boundaries, which I need in order to create safety in my experience with you in this conversation. So speaking your desires or intentions, it's like, what do you want? What do you want to bring through? So for me, it's like, I want to bring through my desires to bring through a powerful presentation. My desire is to give you information that's coming to me. My desire is to hopefully have this vibrate through you into the world and have it another ripple of change in the world. That's desire and intentions. My fears are that I'm talking too fast because I'm on a time limit. My fears are that you feel like I'm bombarding you with information and it's not really having a space to land. My fear is that there's too much content and maybe I should have shortened it. My boundaries are that I'm going to do my best regardless and keep delivering the content. My boundaries are when I feel myself going into talking too fast, that I'm going to tell myself to come back into presence and speak slower. I'm going to request that if there's something that's not landing well, for whatever reason, that somebody speak up and let me know, and I don't feel like, yeah. So the boundary is, if something's not going well in the room, please let me know. Speak or forever hold your peace. So that's an example of authentic communication. By speaking my fears, I'm able to diffuse them and you could hear them, so you could have some compassion for me. By speaking my true desires, it doesn't mean that I'm expecting it to happen, but this is what I'd like. And by owning my boundaries, you hear what my line is and what I won't accept for myself or from our relationship. Is there any questions? Comments? No? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So the fifth pillar is love. And so it's this idea of love as freedom. So culturally, historically, love is not equal to freedom. Love is actually possessive. Love is jealous. You know, I'm jealous because I love you so much. You should be happy I'm jealous. There's nobody out there that's going to love you as much as me. I love you. I'm so jealous. So you have to stay here. You could only be with me, and you can't go out, and you can't go to the store. You can't. No, that's love as possession. So part of the sexual renaissance is love as freedom. So it's actually making a choice. This is where consciousness is coming in. We're making a choice to choose abundant love over limiting fear. So fear limits, fear puts conditions, fear controls. Love is abundant. Love is an energy of giving. I've recently started to define love as, so love being, so if I have a love for a beloved, my love looks like supporting the expansion of the other. So what my love looks like when I'm loving a beloved is loving the expansion of the other, supporting the expansion of the other. And so when you think about that, that's not always the easiest thing to do when the beloved has to move city or country to go on doing their life dream. It wants to control. Or when the beloved says, you are so important to me, I love you, I want to continue this relationship is my priority, and I have desire to experience this other thing with this other person, and it's really important to me because I feel like it's going to help my expansion. I don't know how, but I know it will. That we're like, wow, that's so difficult to swallow. I want to bite your head off right now, and I get it. And I get it, and I'm going to trust in love. I'm going to trust that in love, there will be expansion. And sometimes expansion looks like breaking up. And that's just the way it is. So instead of going there, it's like, how can we come to this idea of non-attachment and recognizing that we are already whole? So if we aren't attached, then we're not getting into this codependent relationship, and that we understand that we're whole. So I know that, this, let me come off the screen. I know that this is not the same for families. This is not the same when we have children. But that's also a conversation to be had, that, what is your relationship when you are as lovers, as beloveds, and what is your relationship in family? And what are the equations and variables that support or hurt those eras? You know what I mean? Like, being lovers is not the same thing as being a family unit. And so what changes? There's an evolution that needs to happen. So when I speak of non-attachment, I'm not saying that, it's almost Superman to be like, oh, I'm going to be with you, we're going to be this close, we're going to be making love, there's this much heart connection, but I'm never attached. It's the difference is like dependence versus interdependence. The difference between dependence and interdependence is like, if I'm dependent on you, it's like, without you, I'm nothing, I'm going to fail, or I'm not, I don't exist. Interdependence means I am all of me, you are all of you, and where we meet, we are going to support each other to expand. And we're choosing to be on a journey together. So it's not like this whole thing of forever and until death do us part. How about if we just took that out and we just said, in every moment that I'm present and desiring this? That's a lot more honest, I think. And so, like I was saying, like, we're celebrating our partner's achievements, and we're connecting to the bigger love. Because if we're coming from this aspect of love as freedom, we understand that as we are loving, because our experience of love can only be giving. Like, I could only love by giving. I can't love by being the object of somebody's love. My responsibility of love is only through my experience, the way I show up with the world. And I'm connected to the infinite. So if I trust in love, I trust that I am choosing the expansion of myself and the expansion of the other. That I will never be depleted, that I will never lose, that I will always be taken care of, that life will be abundant. And so the other point is this idea of self-love. So, you can't, it's not about like, serving the other to the point of detriment onto yourself. You have to take care of self first. You have to recognize that you are a full being in your wholeness, that you're married to your beloved, your inner beloved. And that when you're moving in the world, that you're not moving from a limited idea of fear, contraction, control. This is not love. No matter how many romantic movies or novels you want to read and are showing this as love, this is indoctrination. So when you're stuck in those moments where you don't know what to do because it's challenging, the question would be, what would love do? And remember me saying that love is expansive and love exists in serving the expansion of yourself and the other. So the sixth pillar, expanding the capacity for bliss. So ultimately, this is probably the most important pillar. So I'm going to slow down here. So what we're going for, expanding the capacity for bliss. What we need to recognize is that every moment is a potential for bliss. Because we are bliss. That's our natural state. And so it's hard to really grasp that. So I'm going to take you on a journey to try to get there. And so the reference point I want to give you is the magic moment. We've all had a magic moment, whether it be in that moment that we were making love. That magic moment could have happened in a moment where you were on ayahuasca or any type of plant medicine. That magic moment could have been through a breath work exercise. It's that moment that you step out of ordinary reality. You connect with non-ordinary reality. Your body is interpreting information from a different sense, from a different sense state. That's the magic moment that I'm talking to you about. And that moment is often related to a moment of timelessness and egolessness. Timelessness and egolessness. Think about it in that moment of orgasm. When you're in that moment of prolonged orgasm, you're feeling like everything is standing still, it's timeless, and you're definitely not thinking about your ego or your present story moment in your head or how you look. You are currently living it as an expression. And so this is a moment when we are connected to source. That source is feeding bliss through us. And that our body is illuminated. Ecstasy. And so Osho, which is the 20th century mystic, says there's two ways to connect with source or God. One is through meditation, and one is through sexuality. And he says it's easier to find in sexuality because it's the moment of egolessness and timelessness. And so this is what we're seeking. This is what we're seeking. This is the big drive in each of our lives, the unconscious drive, is this desire to be back in union with the oneness, to connect to God, if you want to put it that way. And you get there through being in the moments of egolessness and timelessness. So what's the shadow of this sex and pleasure and this route towards going towards God? Because it's unconscious, we're oftentimes grasping for the experience. We're trying to recreate it. I want more, I want more, I want more. It's like, I don't want to insult anybody or offend anybody, but this idea of like people that go into an ayahuasca journey and they're doing it like 20 times within 3 months. Unless it's intentional and purposeful and so on, they keep going back in because they want more of that feeling of egolessness, timelessness, connection to source. And so we're looking outside of ourselves to be filled with this, but ultimately it exists within us constantly in every moment. So if we're going into this grasping energy, it's because we have a fear of loss, a fear of lack of attachment, and abandonment. So the ego likes to go after these high intensity states that takes them outside of their mind into their body, so they don't have to think and they just could connect with the oneness. And we do that through different states, taking drugs, recreational, alcohol, recreational, sexuality, intense sexuality, BDSM. So we're always trying to go get more so that we could get that experience. But ultimately, it's in us at every moment. We are already it. And so I'm coming close to the end. And so what I want you to do is, I would like you to acknowledge that we are that empty state of awareness. Trust that we are the bliss. Go from getting pleasure, like going outside of our body to get pleasure, to being pleasure in every moment. And you do this by accessing the subtle energies around us, the subtle energies between us. And that we could be in bliss and ecstasy in some of the most simple moments, like when we're looking into the eyes of our child, that we go into the egolessness and timelessness, and we are in bliss. That we feel a cool wind on our face and our sweaty body, and we rest in the moment and we say, I am the bliss, I am the love, and that I don't have to look outside of myself to feel the epic, eternal energy of bliss, that I feel it on my face. Or that I feel it when I hear the leaves rustling of the trees. That there is bliss in all those moments. So we are the bliss. We don't have to be going outside of ourselves. We don't have to be chasing sex, because magic exists. Those magic moments exist in every moment. So we're going from what things look like, what I need it to look like, to what is present, what is here, what is available, and choosing to be in bliss, especially when we have an emotionally current system. So this is my last slide. So what will it take to bring into this sexual renaissance? Number one, recognizing that we have the power to create our reality. We are it. We are the conscious creator. We are the extension of God and Source. In the moments of presence and clear intentional action, with authentic communication, authentic movement, sound, breath, that we can create everything in front of us. That we must make the choice to do so in order for it to happen. And that we must move from a space of integrity as a guiding principle. That means dropping the lying, dropping the manipulation, dropping the power over. About really understanding what it is to be a good person. And in some of our religions and some of our scriptures, it's actually written there. But how much do we actually focus on those pieces and then focus on the dogma and lose ourselves? That we channel this passion and will and fire of a sacred heart. That our heart, each and every one of our hearts, is the bridge between spirit and earth and manifest. And that it is our role and responsibility to be here, and to be here in aliveness with a fiery, loving heart, to be choosing love time and time again, even when it's hard. Choosing love, especially when it's hard. That's the sacred heart. And ultimately being in service to something bigger than ourselves. We're in a place where we have the potential to be self-actualized, to bring forth everything we want in the world. And yet, there's still this place of transcendence, the transcendent need, the need for us to be giving to something bigger than ourselves. And so when we're serving something bigger than ourselves, that keeps us humble and generous. And that keeps us in the space of a sacred heart, serving the sexual renaissance. So on that note, I just want to leave you with two quotes. One is, the loving are the daring, meaning that it's daring to be loving. It's edgy to be loving. It's not comfortable to be loving. But regardless, we need to let our love free. Because when we let our love free, it's the only way we're actually ever going to change anything around us. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. That's what I've got for you right now. I'm very happy and open to answer any of your questions. Please, much love to you guys. So maybe I could ask you a question. Maybe I could ask you if you could each give me one word in terms of how you're feeling or how the content landed, just so I could get a litmus test.
Firing. Resonance. It makes me think on what we're doing here. Larger scales. Because we're doing a lot here. There's larger and larger community of sacred sexuality. And we're creating events, we're organizing events, but each one is doing his thing. And there's something about like holding together a communal vision, but it is larger than each one's work and our work in Israel. It's like holding a bigger vision.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's exactly what ISTA and the International School of Temple Arts is trying to do. Actually, we're not trying to do it. We are doing it. We're holding point for this conversation. And so for me, the whole like download of this sexual renaissance has come through being into the work of this international school in 35 countries. And so, yeah, you guys, you have one of the richest, the most rich communities around conscious sexuality in the world. And for that, I celebrate you guys, and I feel part of it. So thank you for making me feel part of it. And I would love to have a role, and I think I am having a role through Resonance with some of the allies. But I look forward to coming and meeting all of you. I will be there in September, so maybe there's going to be an opportunity to cross paths sometime in September in person. So if I do, would love to see you and have those conversations, and how we link the personal to the community to the country to the world to the etheric. Because ultimately we could do it. We don't even need the connections of the physical. We're doing it in the ethereal realms already. And that's the shamanic principles. So I leave you my page. You can contact me at frankmondeose.com. My portal with all my links are at frankmondeose.com. And that's the same name as on Facebook. And basically, if you want to know anything to do with my training and education with ISTA or other projects, you could go to sexualrenaissance.com. I've been filming 3 years of my life, of my journey into spirituality and ecstasy. It's all online on YouTube. It's spiritualplayboy.com. I have some videos from Israel, some amazing videos from Israel. They were part of my earliest videos, maybe my first journey. And then, of course, there's my parties that I was talking to you about, mondeose.com. So that's my information, and I think I've ended just on time. I love you, brothers and sisters. Thank you.